Hi, this is Mary Grace with Quilting Bee number 5, and this time it will only be about quilting, or slightly quilting adjacent. I was watching someone, and I can't remember who it was, and she said we need more quilt tube, which inspired me to watch more quilt tube. So I watched T Rose Quilting, which is a mother-daughter team, which I thoroughly enjoyed watching, and I watched Morgan Donner. She's not quilting per se, but she's a lot of sewing things. Again, fascinating to watch. But inspired by the person whose video I couldn't find in my history or couldn't figure out, I'm here with yet another quilt tube. And I remember the first time I did a quilting bee was when I got 50 people to watch my video. So hopefully y'all will like today's video. Now, as you may recall, I'm a member of the Friendship Star Quilting Guild in Gaithersburg. I highly recommend you join a quilting guild. They're fun. And because of them, they do service projects, and so I have completed the quilt top of service project number 2. And again, like I said, this time it was slightly bigger than a baby blanket, but it is together in time for the November meeting, which I told you the last time I filmed the Quilting Bee, which was like back in June, that I probably wouldn't make it until the November meeting, which I'm gonna make. And I did just finish this 2 days ago, and it's the night before Halloween. I would not have picked blue to go around this Christmas thing. I would have picked green. I would have gotten way too caught up in fussy cutting. I can't stand that the heads are all cut off, but it's done. It's not done perfectly. I think I should have ironed it a little bit more in between, but I think it'll be just fine. So someone else will quilt it out and make it for charity, and that will be great. So that's ready to go to the meeting on Monday. Because, of course, get things done just in time for the deadline, which is why I'm shooting tonight. Usually I like to shoot on the weekends, but life's going to be busy. So, service project done. I also mentioned in my last Quilting Bee video that I was working on hexagons. I am now up to 28 hexagons. Need to cut that one. And I've learned something. I was originally just using position number 1 on my machine to stitch. And as you can see, the stitching is way on the edge. I have learned if I use position number 2, it brings it in just enough. It looks so much better. So I'm now up to 28 hexagons. It's going to be a tree eventually. And see, the brown edges are the branches and the green are the leaves of the tree. And I'm a quilt as you go person. I haven't decided if I'm going to quilt a star pattern here or something, but I do want to bring something through the middle. I might have to test it out, or I might just go for some type of star figure, snowflake figure almost. So, but I'm up to 28 of these, so I am quite proud of that. I've been on adventures since last we spoke. I went to the Quilting Museum in Virginia. It is misnamed. Should be called the Quilting Exhibit Hall. I expected to see quilts from 1820, 1830, 1840, 1850 with great stories. They had that for the sewing machines. They had about 40 sewing machines, including toy sewing machines. Really nifty. But they didn't have that for quilts. They did have 3 different quilt exhibits. The first one was a quilt long, and it was 15 versions of the quilt. That's cool. Second one was way too modern for me. And the third one was flower power applique. That was an awesome exhibit. And they were just small quilts, which I thought was cool too. I honestly probably not spend enough time looking at all of them, but there was a lot of applique, which, as you know, I really enjoy. I have most recently cut out the pieces to do a Sue bonnet, although obviously it's going to be a witch, and this is going to be an owl, this is going to be her stew pot, and it's going to go on this gorgeous material. But when I put the pieces on this material, there wasn't enough room to quilt around it, and I had cut the pieces that size because that was the size of my quilt board. I've upgraded my quilt board, my cutting board. My cutting mat is now twice as big and it fits so much better on my cutting board behind me. So that was upgrade number 1. Upgrade number 2 was, this was actually too big. So I wanted some smaller rulers that I could have, so I got these nice collection of smaller rulers. And then I also bought myself some new blades for my rotary cutter. Oh my gosh. I know in all the quilt tutorials, they talk about how you need to replace your blades often. And I was like, yeah, whatever. Really does make a difference. Let me tell you, really does make a difference. Change your quilting, change your rotary blade often, very often. Also bought myself a new seam ripper because, as they say, they get dull. I lost mine. It was too funny. I was walking in the door. My son goes, Mom, I can't find your seam ripper anywhere. I go, neither could I, so I bought a new one. He goes, great. And we don't remember what it was, but we seam ripped something so that he could use it. I'm going to go back and get the smaller one too. Yes, I bought it just because it's green, but it's a nice new one, ergonomic, all that kind of good stuff. I also bought myself new clips. I have about 50 clips now, well, plus the 10, 60. And that's important because my new goal basically is to do a hexagon a day. But I don't sew every day, so my goal is that I prepare enough hexagons that I use up all my clips, which is about 10 hexagons, and then I sew those 10 hexagons, and then I can work on something else. And you're wondering, pray tell, what else might you work on aside from your hexagon quilt, aside from the service project that you're supposed to be working on? I would work on something, like I said, that is slightly quilt adjacent. I'm into Cottage Core, and I got this green dress, but it was so boring that I decided to add a Dresden, four Dresden plate flowers to it. And I just am so thrilled with how it turned out. I think they're gorgeous. I got a brown cake of fabric off of Amazon, and I liked over half the panels, and I had my own panels that I started with that I really liked. And so I added these 4 Dresden circles to this. After I exited the Quilt Museum, which is at a beautiful old mill, I must say it is extremely picturesque. To have a picnic there, it's gorgeous. There's also a historical marker there that tells you all about during the Civil War. They didn't burn livestock belonging to widows. I thought it was cool. They burned everybody else's. So the Quilt Museum, it's misnamed. It should be called Quilt Exhibit Hall. Someone very smartly owns the Patchwork Plus quilt store in Dayton, Virginia. Now that was worth the drive. They have an entire room dedicated to AccuQuilt, which I haven't gotten into, but man, it's tempting. Ooh, I got this cool little pin. And they have a program, whereas if you buy $50 worth of fabric each month, you get a little quilt square to hang from a pin that is very similar to this one. It's not this exact one, it has ones for hangers and what have you. And if you don't make it 1 month, but the next month you buy $200 worth, then you can go back and pick up all the prior months to fill it out. Really cool. And they had some really awesome Halloween fabric, because at some point I want to make the great Halloween quilts. Don't know what that's going to be yet, but I'm getting the fabric. Look at the fabric. I want to have lots of nifty fabric. And then they also had another quilt I want to do. Again, collecting fabric for it, is I want to do a sewing motif. And they had some really nice sewing motif fabric that I picked up there. They had every fabric you can imagine. I was really impressed. There are 2 other quilt stores in Harrisburg, which is 10 minutes from Dayton. You don't need to go to them. I've been to them. Just go to the one in Dayton. That's the only one you need to go to, okay? Enough said. Oh, but Round the corner from the one in Dayton, there's a little Amish marketplace. There's the cheese store. It's a deli. Delicious place to have lunch. So you buy lunch there, go eat it outside the Quilt Museum, go to the Patchwork Place. It is a fun day. I had a great driving adventure. I live up here in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and it's about 2.5 hours down there and back, and it was a great adventure, and I got some cool fabric. Now, as I've said, I want to do some quilts, and you all will remember the accident that I bought octagons. And the problem with the octagon is, unlike the hexagons that I bought, you can marry a hexagon. You know, hexagons fit together nice and easy, which is why I'm doing this hexagon quilt. But an octagon, you have this square that these obviously don't match in size, but you see that point right in there? It's the missing square. But I happen to have a son who happens to have a printer, and he printed me some squares. So he said I needed to shave them just a hair. I can see he does because they don't nest perfectly. But now I have the squares to fit in the part of the octagons so that they all will fit together nicely. And that has been my sewing adventure. I'm just, of course, double checking my little list over here of things to make sure I've talked about all things quilting and only things quilting this time. And I do hope that you've enjoyed this quilt tube and that I will see your quilt tube in the future. Thank you. Bye.